Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. So today I just wanted to talk about the Hedonites of Slaanesh, their lore and tactics, and just kind of just talk about my general opinion on them. I wasn't necessarily going to make a video about them this soon in the year, but I guess some things have come up recently that have reignited my interest in them. I'll get more into it as the video goes on, but truth be told, I do believe we've definitely seen some rumblings of perhaps a book update in the future, and I think I speak for many that would be greatly welcomed. So let's just begin. So the Hedonites of Slaanesh, who are they? Well, essentially, they are the mortal and demonic followers of the Chaos God Slaanesh. What separates them specifically from their fellows in the Grand Alliance Chaos is that their entire lives leading up to their inevitable death or ascension, mind you, is their pursuit of all things sensation and excess. To venerate their god, they follow the teachings that excess is the greatest strive that they must do in their existence. Be they to become maybe the greatest warrior, or hear the greatest scream of a dying person, or just the greatest high that they can find. Basically, the idea is not just simply to indulge, but to indulge to excesses beyond belief. In doing so, Slaanesh corrupts all manner of individuals throughout the realms. For quite frankly, just simply indulging in anything, be they just their own career, their painting hobby, or just trying to become the most exquisite warrior ever. When it inevitably gets taken to its excessive extremes, they risk becoming corrupted by the temptations of Slaanesh, who offer them the outlets to experience these excesses and to seek them out no matter what. Because of this, the Hedonites of Slaanesh, whoever they may be, are easily among the most dangerous and, in also some ways, most passionate of the many forces that are vying for control of the realms. And whatever you might think of them, they're definitely a unique force nonetheless. So, what is the story of the Hedonites of Slaanesh? Well, we can, like so many different factions in Age of Sigmar, we can find its origins back in the earliest stages of the Age of Myth. Following the destruction of the old world, Slaanesh had managed to gorge itself on the souls of the elven peoples of the former old world, and had become bloated with power, but also sluggish, I guess you would describe it. Well, at least as sluggish as a god can. Now, this would have spelt the end of the elven race as a whole if it wasn't for the timely arrival of some of the former pantheon. Well, no, not pantheon, but I guess ascended mortals of the old world. The elven gods eventually managed to make their way to the mortal realms, and though they managed to define some elves already incarnated in the mortal realms, they realized that the vast majority of the former elven peoples were nowhere to be found. Eventually, after searching for many years, they discovered what fate befell them, and they concocted a plan to free them from Slaanesh's grasp. So, in so doing, they managed to lure Slaanesh into a sub-realm between the realms of Hysh and Ulgu, and using both light and shadow magic, entrap Slaanesh in bindings made of light and shadow magic that not even a god could break. These chains of literal, I guess, contradictions, I guess you could call them, were made in such a way that they couldn't physically be broken. Each chain could only be broken from a contradiction taking place. And in doing so, this for the first time in probably Warhammer's history, a Chaos God had been taken off the board. While it was imprisoned, the elven gods eventually started to make good use of their captured prisoner. Siphoning the soul slowly out of Slaanesh's gullet, they managed to repopulate their shattered people and bring them forward into the Age of Myth proper. Slaanesh, obviously wishing to escape from this imprisonment, found that even its power wasn't enough to break its hold. And in doing so, its followers were unfortunately now divided and leaderless. So how did they take the loss of their god? Well, you would think probably bad, but that's the thing with Slaanesh's followers, much like Slaanesh itself, they were beings of many different moods. Essentially, what happened is his followers divided up into three broad groups. One were the Seekers. These individuals have decided that they themselves will take it upon themselves to find their missing god and rescue Slaanesh from wherever they may be held. So they specializing in fast-moving armies that could cross the realms at breakneck speed. They follow up any and all leads in trying to find their god. Probably the largest group, however, came to be known as the Invaders. The Invader hosts, while on one hand were devastated by the loss of their god, on the other hand, they kind of thought to themselves, well, you know what, if Slaanesh were here, they would want us to just keep doing our thing, and that's what they did. So basically, they even with the loss of their god, they still kept up their momentum in pursuit of both destroying the forces arrayed against chaos and pursuing their hedonistic and excessive vices to their fullest extent. And they've thought to themselves, obviously, well, if we just happen to find Slaanesh on the way to sacking the city, well, more the merrier. However, probably the more interesting, at least from my perspective, subgroup were actually the Pretenders. These were individuals that saw Slaanesh's loss as a personal boon. These demonic and mortal leaders have taken it upon themselves to pass themselves off as the next coming of Slaanesh, wishing to claim their former god's position as the new god of excess. Unfortunately, while good in theory, they realized that, well, they would have quite a bit to answer for if their god ever came back. So raced very quickly to amass as much power and followers as they can to take the throne in case, Slaanesh ever comes back. So and coming back, the Slaanesh definitely wishes to achieve. Realizing that the only way to break its chains, it was basically to enact the contradiction that each chain that it was bound in represented. So over many centuries, Slaanesh eventually managed to project some level of its mental connection to some of its followers, and began informing them on how to gradually start breaking the chains. For example, it let some of its followers know that one of the chains required saviors to turn upon the people they deemed to protect. In so doing, they instigated many cult uprisings among the cities of Sigmar, prompting the Stormcast Eternals to have to turn upon their own citizens in order to put down the invaders and also to root out the chaos infiltration. The screams and of mortals who saw their own protectors turn on them led to the destruction of one of Slaanesh's chains. Another was actually caused by his brother Khorne. One of the chains that he was ensnared in could only be broken by the power of someone who hated him the most. Well, the elven gods assumed that this chain would never be broken because they all assumed that one of them would have been the one who hated him the most. But in fact, it was actually Khorne. So in so doing, Slaanesh's followers tricked Khorne into letting out a bellow of power so powerful that the shockwave broke Slaanesh's chain in his prison. And honestly, one of my favorite ones, in fact, was another one orchestrated by Slaanesh in regards to another uprising. So yes, but the thing is though that even though the chains were being broken, the process was very slow. Maybe one chain was maybe broken in centuries. However, the process has been recently sped up from recent events in the mortal realms. When Nagash began his Soul Wars, he kicked it off with his grand ritual, the Necroquake. This reverberation of death magic swept through the entire realms, and in fact even affected Slaanesh in his prison. when the power of the Necroquake affected Slaanesh's prison, it allowed him to, it basically disrupted the concealment spells on the chains, allowing Slaanesh to see the locks on dozens upon dozens of the chains that held it. In so doing, it managed to send this information to its followers, who began quickly exploiting this to start to finding more contradictions to break to free more of the chains. One of the biggest issues to come from this, however, was from during the Broken Realms saga following the Soul Wars, where Morathi made a daring, I guess you could say, bank heist into Slaanesh's gullet, where she enacted a ritual to re-enter Slaanesh's gullet to consume the souls of the former elven gods to ascend to godhood herself. But in so doing, Slaanesh managed to send out a stream of power from itself that eventually coalesced into its children, the newborn, as it was called. And then following that, which very soon after that, mind you, Archaon, desiring to free Slaanesh, to have as many allies as he could, actually managed to track down Slaanesh's prison. While there, he didn't exactly like the idea of interacting with Slaanesh directly, as he was quite sassy, mind you. He actually did manage to sever some of the chains that held Slaanesh. And he probably would have succeeded, however, but if it wasn't for Catacross's invasion of the 8 Points dragging him away from his quarry. Which was unfortunate, because he knew the elven gods would move the prison again, so he wouldn't be able to find him quite as easy. But still, this brought a lot of hope to Slaanesh, as it showed that their prison wasn't invulnerable, and it was very rapidly weakening at the seams. So following this, the newborn that escaped from a piece of Slaanesh eventually coalesced into two new greater demons. I believe they're called Dexessa and Excessa. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce the names, but essentially they became two new figureheads for the veneration of the Hedonites of Slaanesh in general. In doing so, they also gave Slaanesh once again another new hand in the realms to interact with in the greater conflicts while it was still imprisoned. And in doing so, as his prison began to weaken, Slaanesh gains in power as well. And in so doing, it has managed to empower many great followers, such as Glutos and the returned Sigvald, who are working in consorts somewhat in order to free their entrapped deity. So as of now, the Slaanesh is still imprisoned within the sub-realm between Hysh and Ulgu. However, the chains that binding it are very rapidly breaking, and it's believed it's only a matter of time before it is freed. Oh, and I get this a lot too. Some people are asking, well, how come his jailers doesn't know that the chains are breaking? Well, essentially, every time Slaanesh breaks a chain, they weave a spell to create an illusion that the chain is still in place. So as soon as it breaks, they replace it with an illusion that the chain's still there. So as far as his jailers are concerned, they are still very well enticed. So basically, that's the whole story up till now. They're still slowly breaking out, but it's looking more and more likely that they will eventually escape at some point in the future. And lo and behold, the realms when they get out. As always, there's some good sources here too if you want to read the lore in more in depth yourself. I always encourage that, because that's always some of the fun. So, how does this army play in theory? Well, that's a very interesting. It's a very interesting question one must ask themselves. Yeah, the Hedonites of Slaanesh are actually somewhat unique among at least the four main Chaos Gods, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now, intrinsically, they basically serve as a glass cannon. In theory, mind you. We're going to get back to that. Basically, the whole idea is that the army overall is quite fragile, but it hits well above its weight class. And I guess you could argue that to an extent. One thing this army does definitely have going for it is speed. What the army overall, I would say, the idea is that it's a fast-moving army that's able to outmaneuver its opponent and gradually pick them apart. In fact, the Hedonites of Slaanesh, I would say, are actually, in terms of getting in terms of cavalry and like chariots, I think they're one of the best cav armies in the game. By that I mean that you have such a variety of different units. You have you have so many different mounted units, so many different versions of chariots. It's one of the easiest armies in the game to just go all cavalry, and because of this, they're also arguably one of the fastest armies in the game too. Being able with many units having run and charge, re-rolling charge distances. It's just, yeah, like you're and just having very high base movement. You're never at a loss when it comes to speed. In addition to this, the Slaanesh is also very good when it comes to general shooting. Unlike, for example, with the exception of the Disciples of Tzeentch and I guess maybe the Skaven, Chaos in general isn't really the best when it comes to shooting. Because we're with the Grand Alliance as a whole focus more around melee. The Hedonites of Slaanesh, well, very heavily focus on melee, don't get me wrong, but they have between their Blissbarb archers, who are one of their main battle line, to other options in the book, they have it's like among the Chaos armies, they have a much easier time getting missile attacks into the army. And now I wouldn't really go on a limb and say their shooting is spectacular, but it's not necessarily something to discount either. Their high volume of attacks can definitely drown out unwary opponents. And this also ties into the army's general idea on how it functions in general, where it tends to rely on a high weight of attacks rather than high damage. So, for example, even among its more heavier hitters, such as the Painbringers or the Mirror or the Twin Souls, who basically serve as their elite infantry, don't get me wrong, their hitting power is good, mind you, but even still, it tends to lean more towards weight of attacks rather than high damage attacks, where basically they have Slaanesh in general has very good to hit ratios, but also relies on its faction, its army faction ability, where every 6 to hit generates more hits. So again, just drowning your opponent in endless attacks and gradually wearing them down. And honestly, because of this, the Hedonites of Slaanesh have a very high amount of tactic variety. So, like I said, you can go all cavalry. If you're taking the Pretender subfaction, you can technically go all chariots. You can just flood the board with fragile but still very fast chariots. And also, if you bring a Painbringer as your warlord, you can even take your elite infantry, such as the Painbringers and the Twin Souls. So you can actually have technically a hard anvil style army with relatively high armor save units. So which I'm trying to say is goes to show that the whole idea of Slaanesh necessarily being just a fast glass cannon isn't necessarily the only way they can play. And actually, that's something that is really good for the army in general, because for example, for example, some armies, at least for now, like Blades of Corn, yes, there are ways to move to play around with the idea, but the whole idea is with them is bunch of clumps of infantry or heavy infantry, run them at the opponent and try to kill them as fast as possible. Slaanesh can obviously do that, but they can't. But they do have other ways to work around it. Like, for example, with Disciples of Tzeentch, obviously they want to leverage their spells, but they do. But Slaanesh can definitely leverage their spells as well. But they can also do so with a great speed attached to it. So the fact is, I think this is really something that the army I think really exemplifies, is that it's very balanced in terms of unit selection. You have You have like your cheap chaff, you have your heavy anvil units, you have your fast cavalry, you have your your chariot war machines, and on top of it, and to top it all off, they also have a very unique way of summoning demons, where the idea of them doing chip damage to different units, including themselves, to build up depravity points, which they can then use to summon more demons. And anyone who heard the term depravity farming will probably know that if especially if you bring enough Blissbob archers, you can really rack up the depravity points very, very quickly in a given game. And if your opponent is not careful, they can very easily find themselves swamped by not only their opponent's units, but also just waves of demons. And also one other thing they do good is as I mentioned, they're actually probably second after Disciples of Tzeentch in terms of the amount of like wizards you can get in your army. Like they have a lot of heralds, and pretty much all the demonic heralds are all wizards to some extent. So even though they're not nearly as potent as Disciples of Tzeentch in this matter, it's definitely not something to discount, especially considering I personally find that Hedonites of Slaanesh's endless spells, in my opinion, are some of the best in the game, especially the mirror, if you know what I'm talking about. So now that I've kind of gone over some of the better points of the books and how it functions, let's kind of cut to the chase here. Hedonites of Slaanesh, as they are now, are not doing particularly well. Maybe they're suffering from the sins of the past, where earlier Hedonites of Slaanesh were a very overpowered book. Maybe they were designed to be better, but the game designers dropped the ball. I don't know what it is. But the battle tome as it stands is not really all that good, objectively speaking. Like I'm not saying you can never win with Hedonites of Slaanesh, but even by GW's own metrics, they're really trailing behind the rest of the armies. Like Hedonites of Slaanesh, ever since they got since they came out some time ago, they've gotten nothing but updates and points drops across the board, just desperately trying to bring the army up to like a more competitive level, and they just can't seem to do it. Which I believe is because, just objectively speaking, the book has a lot of some issues that can't be solved with patches and points drops. So in that regard, I'm just going to list them right here. So here are some of my gripes. Gripe 1. I feel that there's not enough cannon to glass ratio, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So the problem I find with is that the army is, in a lot of regards, its damage output is quite poor. Like I said, as I mentioned before, that the whole concept is behind like weight of attacks, just like drown your opponent in attacks. But the thing is, even with this in mind, is from what I've been seeing, even with like 6 hit generating more hits, lots of base attacks, it's just they're just not putting out enough damage to make up for how much damage they're taking in turn. Because remember, again, many units in Hedonites of Slaanesh are not very strong, and not very durable. And in this regard, as they start taking more damage, they're not putting out enough to compensate for it. So more often than not, they gradually begin to lose the attrition war. And in this regard, they're really starting to lag behind other more recent armies in many areas. Like, for example, they're even in terms of speed, many armies like for example, like the Caradhran Overlords, or for example, even the Stormcast, they have various ways of deep striking and outmaneuvering them. So even their speed is becoming less of an advantage in this regard. And in addition to this, this whole their need for chip damage, because as I mentioned, their whole summoning mechanic, like at this point, one of the few things keeping the army even base competitive is all based around, like, chipping damage away, taking a wound off here, not wiping out units. It's actually starting to, like, it's kind of encouraging people not to focus fire enough to destroy units. Like, for example, with the Blitzbob archers, like, don't, instead of unloading into a single unit to wipe it out, they spread their fire around to rack up as many depravity points as they can. But now, in theory, I found this can, like, in theory that sounds like a good idea, but what I'm finding is that they're not doing enough damage to units in general, that when it's your opponent's turn to come in, you have a bunch of, like, relatively intact units that are just coming into your lines and just smashing your face in. And the problem is, like, all the summoning in the world isn't going to save you if most of your units to begin with are already dead. Because I'm just going to come out and say it too. Slaanesh's demon arm, like the demon units in Hedonites of Slaanesh, are not really that good. And I think I understand too. Like, when I find whenever GW has like units that can be summoned, they generally make them somewhat underpowered to try to make sure that they don't, like, make the army overpowered if they manage to summon them too early. So that's what so that doesn't really, so again, you're not, like, you're being encouraged not to hurt your opponent enough, just to summon in units that might come in later and hopefully will do something. And also in this regard, they like when it comes to actual combat, they're very reliant on just a couple key units. Like, for example, like, for the most part, most units in Hedonites of Slaanesh, their damage output is mediocre to poor in general, with only a few standouts. For example, Sigvald, whenever he's brought on, he has to serve as the main hammer for a Hedonites of Slaanesh army, or Glutos if he's included, or maybe a Keeper of Secrets if you're managed to include them. But even though they're very good, like, especially compared to some of the newer, like, heroes in books that come out recently, even then they're not exactly, like, spectacular in that regard too. And I'm a very big believer, armies, like, shouldn't be too reliant on singular units to be effective, like, in one area. Like, you shouldn't have to rely on a few key heroes for your combat. You shouldn't have to rely on a few key casters to make your shooting units even remotely good. Like, that's what I mean. Like, the army as a whole, it doesn't do enough damage, and it's just not durable enough to win an attrition fight. So that's my first gripe. My second gripe is, in any future book of Hedonites of Slaanesh, the internal mechanics need a major overhaul. Like, synergies in Hedonites of Slaanesh are heavily lacking. Like, now, I'm not saying that they don't exist, but, like, especially in comparison to more modern books, they're like how the units interact with each other, how they buff each other, how heroes buff their units, or how their units interact with their heroes. It's the synergy is very lacking. Like, in many a times, it's just like it's just simple things like re-rolling ones, or, like, for example, like, okay, pick a unit over there and get +1 to wound it, which again sounds good in theory, but, like, for example, you have your mortal caster, the soul bringer. Like, so basically, like, okay, she points at a unit, and okay, you get +1 to wound against it. Now, in theory, that sounds pretty good, but it's obvious. But the problem is with Hedonites of Slaanesh. Sorry, no, sorry, I meant Shard Speaker. This is like the Shard Speaker, the mortal caster. Like, if like, now, in theory, she would be a very good buffer, but like I said, her points at a unit and say, okay, +1 to wound it in the next combat. That is great. Unfortunately, it's not quite what the army needs. Like, because for example, a lot of units in Hedonites of Slaanesh, they only have a few base low damage attacks. So, like, for example, if I'm rushing at an enemy with a bunch of Seekers of Slaanesh, okay, so I'm hitting, so okay, so I run into them, I do maybe, let's say, like 2 attacks into them, and I do 3s and 4s. Now I'm doing 3s and 3s, like 1 damage, 1 rend. That's not really going to cut it. So, and in addition to that, like, most heroes are they either do poor buffing or they don't do any buffing at all. They're just meant to be beat sticks, and beat sticks in Slaanesh are just kind of laughable. In addition to this, there's not enough fast heroes in the army, especially on the mortal side. Like, but what I mean is that you have all these like major cavalry units, and you have all these fast-moving units that move around the board. But a lot of your support heroes are often unmounted, and they have a slower base speed. And now I know you're probably thinking, well, we have all those heralds in the army. That will allow us to keep up, but most of their buffs are generally about buffing other demon units. And as I mentioned before, Slaanesh demons are not exactly the most competitive arm of the army. So, and I think this is really bad because, when the book was getting updated, they actually lost a mounted hero. So the problem is you have all these heavy-hitting cavalry units, and they're not really getting proper hero support because more often than not, they're way on the other side of the board from them. And in addition to this, the army, because of this, the army is very reliant on a few key units to perform, for example, force multiplying. For example, I found a lot of competitive builds are very reliant on units like Glutos, who is one of the few legitimately good force multipliers in the book, where they can buff mortals, they're good casters, they give a bunch of aura effects. That's all good and dandy, but again, that's one unit, and he's a unique unit, so you can't spam him. And on top of that, he's very expensive. So, like I said, instead of having what the book really needs right now is not one big centerpiece model that's really good that can do something really good. It needs a bunch of cheaper heroes that can give much better buffs. So, for example, the Shard Speaker, instead of pointing at an enemy and saying, okay, +1 to wound that guy over there, what the army really needs is something that deals with the current meta of the game, such as more rend, maybe more damage on attacks, more attacks in general. Like I said, +1 wound is not really good when your attacks suck to begin with. So basically, I'm going from mediocre to okay, I guess. That's not really going to cut it, especially against a challenging opponent. So, gripe number 3, summoning mechanic is really hurting the army structure. So, on the one hand, I actually give credit where credit is due. The summoning mechanic for Hedonites of Slaanesh, I would say, is actually one of the better ones in the game. It's very easy to rack up depravity points just by wounding every unit on the board, including your own. I've seen people go on turn 2 and they already have 18, 20 depravity points, believe it or not, and this is really good too. But again, it really, I feel it handicapped the book coming out, because a lot of people might not remember, but when this book first came out, everything in the book was priced very harshly, very, very harshly. For example, the the Miradish Painbringers, who were basically the Liberator equivalent, the Stormcast Liberator equivalents, were priced 40% more than them, and they arguably were worse. And many of the units in the book were very overpriced at the time, because obviously the game designers were basically they were doing the thing what they do with all the summoning armies. They make all the units base price more expensive than they normally would, in order to factor in the fact is that you're probably going to be summoning a lot more units onto the board. Okay, seems fair. Unfortunately, this was not good for them, especially out of the board, because again, the individual units in the Hedonites of Slaanesh were not tailored very well. So you had basically a bunch of okay to mediocre to just bad units priced very expensively, and then for the most part they were very fragile. So generally speaking, you were probably having less points on the board, like less units on the board than you would have against your opponent. And like say, if they could get into you quickly, they could very quickly decimate your maybe even your almost, maybe not certainly, but smaller force than them. And then by the time you do get to summoning, oftentimes it was already too late, because again, if half your army's dead by like turn 2, summoning 1 unit of demonettes really isn't going to save you. And then again this led to also other problems with the books, like for example discouraging focus fire, because if you wipe out a unit, you don't get any depravity points, so it discouraged you from sniping out units or sniping out characters. And again, it's very likely the reason why the demon arm of the book was so mediocre. If they're thinking, if you're summoning a bunch of units onto the field, well, I can't make them too strong because then they're going to be overpowered. But here's the problem: they didn't make the non-summoning units in the book strong enough to compensate. So your demon wing is mediocre, and to maybe okay, and your mortal wing is not that much better. It's mediocre to just bad in some cases. So they were basically, they had the worst of both worlds in that regard. Now GW has basically been trying to compensate for this by just dramatically lowering the points. Like, I think at the time of saying this, the Painbringers, again the Liberator equivalents, I think they're actually cheaper than Liberators. Yeah, so yeah, like just let that sink in for a minute. So I do feel I think the summoning mechanic needs to be retooled, because because it's so easy to rack up points to summon. It's just encouraging them to make the army either too expensive or the unit stats too mediocre. I think they need to make summoning, like, I'm not saying get rid of summoning. I actually like summoning, as I've mentioned before, but they need to retool it to make it just a little less spammable, so it will encourage them to make just the base unit stats better. So, and as I've been using that word a lot, but again, I just want to just double down on it. I think this is just the biggest problem with this book. Everything is mediocre. Like, this also kind of makes me mad too, because this army, I love the army construction. It can do almost anything. It's got lots of missile attacks. It's got lots of cavalry, lots of ways to get wizards and spell casting on the board. You can even get like some anvil stuff going. But it's just nothing's good enough. They can shoot, but just not good enough. They can fight, but it's just not that great in the grand scheme of things. Like, they have like the Hedonites of Slaanesh, like, for example, like, they have lots of ways to get spell casting in the army, but for example, unlike, let's say, Disciples of Tzeentch, there's really not a lot of ways to buff their spell casting, make it more consistent. And their spell lores, while they have lots of spells in their spell lores, a lot of it actually falls into the issues of the army in general. It was made obviously with the idea of chip damage. Like, a lot of their spells, like, on average, will only do like 1 or 2 mortal wounds to a unit. Like, sure, great to like farm depravity points, but when you actually need to buff your units or kill your opponents, a lot of it's just not really that good. Like, compare it to, let's say, like the Disciples of Tzeentch or the Lumineth Realm Lords, 2 other armies that can get spells like heavy spell use on the table. Their spell lores just kick Slaanesh to the curb in this regard. Yes, they have some good endless spells, but that's just not enough, And again, like I mentioned, shooting is very abundant in Slaanesh. Like, like I said, they're probably maybe the second most prolific shooting army in Chaos in general. But again, the army design just doesn't encourage it. Like I said, even their for example, it encourages you to split fire, and in fact, once again, because of how depravity points are found, for example, their battle line units, the Bliss Barb archers. When they first came out, they were incredibly expensive, and like I said, the obvious reason for that was because, well, they're your easiest way to farm depravity points, so they were just made way too expensive. So you have this reasonably good shooting unit that was just massively overcosted. They've come down in price since, but still the point stands. Like I said, like it's just everything was just bleeding into it. And again, Slaanesh does have ways of anviling. You know, like for example, you know, they have their pain bringers. You know, they can take a hit here, but it's just really, it's just legitimately cute. Like compare what Slaanesh can do in terms of being able to anvil to, let's say, like the Stormcast Eternals. Like the Stormcast Eternals, you know, yes, they can buff their saves beyond just all-out defense. They can get them like, you know, ward saves. They can get them like debuffs to wound them. You know, they can buff up their attacks to make them even stronger than that. Like for example, if Slaanesh if a Slaanesh anvil and a Stormcast anvil hit each other, like Slaanesh would break like glass. It's like glass hitting a brick wall. Like or for example, like compare Slaanesh's ability to anvil to, let's say, Slaves to Darkness. It's just pitiful. And I know what some people might say, well, Slaanesh isn't really made to be an anvil to start with, but even comparatively, it's just not that good. And on top of this, like I said, it's a very fast army, but the problem is that speed, you know, because of the just like the relatively mediocre profiles of the units, that can also be a bad thing, because again, you're going to send out all your fast moving units, let's say, up the board to take objectives or, you know, like harass the enemy. But if they're so far away from support, because remember, a lot of your heroes can't really keep up, at least the ones you want to keep up, they can't really buff them. And like I said, like once they're in combat all alone up there, you know, they're just not really going to do much. Like, you know, you can get some Hellstriders to just go up there and, you know, just smash face up there, but without any support, they're not going to last very long. So what was the point of even sending them up so far to begin with, you know? Like, again, like, they need ways of being able to take their speed as a fast army, but then capitalize on it. Like, for example, like, look at the new Nighthaunt. Like, they can fly, and they have like, you know, when they charge in, they have ways to debuff their opponent in very significant ways to give them advantage if they're not properly supported. And on top of this, like, the Nighthaunt, once they can also fall back. And, you know, they can fall back and charge. Like, they can't be, you know, like, they have ways of not getting, like, bogged down in melee, you know. Like I said, they have much better ways to capitalize on their speed. Hedonites, in my opinion, just lack that. Now, I know this has kind of been sounding kind of doom and gloom, but I do think there's hope on the horizon. So, basically, as some of you might already know, as of me making this, the Beasts of Chaos Battle Tome, the new one, just recently came out, and it really had something I really liked. So, the Slangor Fiend Bloods, as you might all know, it can be included in the Beasts of Chaos Battle Tome. And I know what you're thinking. Why? The Fiend Bloods were arguably the worst unit in one of the worst books in the game right now. Like, they were just basically their entire unit profile was just like, it was basically just an embodiment of everything that's wrong with the book. Really fast, really fragile. Hitting power is negligible, and also on top of this, it seems to have a bunch of nice rules on it, but not ones that it really needs. Like, okay, +1 attack on the charge, great. We have one more mediocre attack going into the enemy. Like, that's not what this unit needed to actually be good. Well, look at but compare that to the updated version. Oh, well, let's see. Okay, you know, still fragile, still fast. Okay, nothing's changed there. But just look at the attack profile. Like, OMG. Like, this is what this unit needed. Like, yes, it's okay for the unit to be fragile. It's okay that it'll probably eventually die. But as long as it hits above its waistline. Like, sorry, yeah, it hits above its weight class. Like, it just goes in with a buttload of attacks, and each one of those attacks do a ton of damage to the opponent. So even though they're going to take damage, they're going to dish out probably just as much, if not more, damage before they go down. And on top of that, they have special rules that actually benefit a very fragile unit, such as if they get shot, they can immediately move. So they're not just getting stuck in the backfield, getting picked off. No, they're constantly moving. And they can even attack twice once per game. So again, we have a true glass cannon here. So the fact that they did this kind of a glow up to one of the worst units in the book is actually really gives me hope that when they eventually do update Hedonites of Slaanesh, they will do the army proper justice. Because this on the left is basically like a complete embodiment of everything wrong with Hedonites as they are, and the one on the right is just an embodiment of just what they could be. Like a glass hammer that actually functions as a hammer and actually has utility. That's what I really hope they bring to the rest of the Hedonites book when they update it. So I'm just going to wrap this up quickly because I feel like I've been talking enough already. Overall, Hedonites of Slaanesh are in a precarious situation right now. They're just getting like patch after patch trying to bring them up into like the safety zone that GW wants to create. But honestly, I think the only thing that can legitimately save this army is a full redo. Like points drops aren't going to do it. Additional rules in a white dwarf are not going to do it. The army has fundamental problems, and they can only fix those with a full from top to bottom redo. And I actually feel like that is actually what's going to be happening soon. And I do actually feel there's hope that this will come out for the better. Because if they do basically what they did with like Beasts of Chaos and the new Gloomspite Gits that just recently came out, I feel we might with the days of the top performing Hedonites army may be on the horizon again. Who knows? Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a nice day.